Good morning, everybody. I realize now that I'm a greeter that I'm not the only one that comes tearing in on two wheels at 9:30 for this service. We've got a couple more people coming in, but you will notice that I am not Nicholas Vesey. And Nicholas is on a well-deserved vacation with his family in Florida for 2 weeks. And so I guess the true test of any community is, if we can keep it going when we're home alone. And there are 5 of us this morning doing what Nicholas does pretty much by himself every Sunday. And my job today is to welcome you and to greet everybody here in the chapel as well as streaming online. Welcome. Is there anybody here who is at the chapel for the first time on a Sunday? There are gifts involved with this. This is a very important question. Okay, Maggie, we have no gifts to give, no chocolate to pass out, as Nicholas likes to say. Let's see, what's next? Nicholas and Heather. When somebody's not here, it's a good time to talk about them. Down south, we'd say don't talk about anybody because everybody's related to everybody. But I want to talk about Nicholas and Heather today since they're not here. I think we all are very keenly aware that in Nicholas's 4.5 years here with us, he's done something kind of magical. He's taken a lot of very loose threads that kind of pass in and out of the chapel at different times of the week or the year, and he's helped us weave those threads into the warp and weft of community. And he's done it through the sheer force of his personality, through his tireless energy, and of course his deep spiritual foundation and practice. And it couldn't have been better time because the chapel is embarking this year on our 50th anniversary. We'll be reconsecrating this mid-century masterpiece that was left as a legacy to us. And yet today, Heather and Nicholas are celebrating a different anniversary. Today is their 18th wedding anniversary, and they're very appropriately celebrating it on the beach. But just on the off chance that they are streaming this morning, would you all like to join me in wishing Heather and Nicholas a happy anniversary? Okay, so I'm going to invite everyone who would like to stand up, turn around and face the camera right there at the bottom of and on the count of 3, we will say happy anniversary, Heather and Nicholas. 1, 2, 3. Happy anniversary, Heather and Nicholas. Thank you. Thank you. And we are all holding you in our hearts right now and joyous celebration of your wedding anniversary and for everything that you both and your family mean to this community. All right, what next? Oh, I also want to begin with some announcements. But first, I have to say, every Sunday morning when I walk into the chapel and I look at Shelley Franklin's incredible flowers, I am so grateful for her and for what she means to the community. And the programming note here, I am told on reliable authority that her arrangement today includes healing aloe. You probably see it right there in the center of the arrangement. And so much thought goes into everything she does for us on the chapel, for the chapel on every Sunday morning. So thank you, Shelley. Some announcements. Monday, tomorrow morning at 8:15 is the Zen-style morning meditation with Tim Cooney. On Tuesday, the regular weekly meeting of Aspen Noise, ordinary people making an extraordinary noise, here at the Aspen Chapel on Tuesday night at 5:30. There's a yoga meditation also on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, there is Vipassana meditation at 11:30. That's Lisa Goddard. More detail about that practice is at the back of the room. and also Insights, the regular weekly meeting of Insights, Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock. And I've also been asked to let you know that Nicholas's second book is available downstairs after the service. Many of you are familiar with Nicholas's first book, Developing Consciousness, and some 800 people throughout the valley have taken his Developing Consciousness course based on that book. This is his second book, Living with the Life Force, and you can get a copy downstairs after the service. Nicholas, I'm sure, would autograph it for you as well when he's back. I'm not going to do that for him. And let's see, what else? Some really exciting events coming up. There's a brochure on this at the back, but most of you are familiar with the name Thomas Keating, our own Father Thomas from St. Benedict's Monastery in Old Snowmass. Thomas died earlier this year, and there's a weekend celebrating his legacy and thinking about where that legacy will go with what can only be described as an all-star cast of Cynthia Bourgeau, Ed Bastian, Rami Shapiro, Camille and Kabir Helminski, and others, all thinking about what Thomas has done. Most of you all know Thomas is certainly one of the leading figures in reclaiming contemplative practice for Christianity. So it's a huge legacy, and I think it's going to be an interesting program. Details at the back of the chapel, and you can register online. Does anybody else have other events to announce? Anything else going on that we need to share? There is one thing I just learned. This is hot off the press. Tom Ward, our own Tom Ward, is the set designer for an amazing play called Tribes that's going on at Thunder River. Tickets are available online. The opening preview is this Thursday, and it runs for 3 weekends. If you liked Children of a Lesser God, about played by the deaf actress Marlee Matlin, you will love Tribes and its epic story of a family dealing with deafness. The lead is actually played by a deaf actor, so there are surtitles above the stage, and it just sounds like an amazing thing, and Tom is very excited to be a part of that. Anything else? Okay, we'll now pause for a little prelude of music, the Arioso Bach. And this is a time to come into the room. It's a time to come into our bodies and to shut off the gerbils and really to be present with one another. A pro tip on this from Cynthia Bourgeau via her Gurdjieff work is think about your feet. Think about where your feet are and feel the connection of your feet to the earth as we join together in this music. Beautiful. Thank you, Kathy and Susan. This morning, Heather Rydell has an amazing program for the children. It's about connection with nature. She's going to be reading the incredible book, The Everything Seed, and they're going to be collecting objects from nature and putting them together and thinking about how we all connect. So if any children would like to go down and join Heather Rydell for the children's program, this is the time to do that. Have fun. I'm jealous. Now, will you join me in our opening prayer? O love divine, to whom all hearts are open, all desires known, and from whom no secrets are hidden. Cleanse the thoughts of our hearts by the inspiration of your Holy Spirit, that we may perfectly love you and worthily magnify your holy name. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Michelle Scoggin doesn't need any introduction to you all. She has been the youth coordinator here for some time, but I guess a couple of weeks ago, there was a Facebook post about Michelle, and I learned a thing or two. And for those of you that haven't seen it, Michelle has an amazing background as an educator. She's brought, she studied education and she's done postgraduate work in education, but she actually used the Roaring Fork Valley schools as a laboratory to study how social justice could be brought into the education system, which I think is so cool. She's also just proving her superpowers. She was a middle school teacher for 6 years. I can't imagine anything more challenging. She taught language arts at the community school. But she's now active not only here at the chapel, but in all kinds of initiatives. She's worked for Girls Leadership. She's worked with the Youth World Leadership School, trying to introduce cultural immersion to American kids. Tonight, she leaves taking a delegation of young people from our community down to the US-Mexico border to walk a mile in the shoes of people on both sides of that border. She's also a wife and mother of an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. So just a little bit more about the Michelle we know and love. And her husband, her beautiful husband, Jeff, who I just met, is going to give the reading and followed by Michelle's message.
This is the Prayer for Freedom out of the Four Agreements book by Don Miguel Ruiz. Today, Creator of the universe, we ask that you come to us and share with us a strong communion of love. We know that your real name is love, that to have a communion with you means to share the same vibration, the same frequency that you are, because you are the only thing that exists in this universe. Today, help us be like you are, to love life, to be love. Help us to love the way you love, with no conditions, no expectations, no obligations, without any judgment. Help us to love and accept ourselves without any judgment, because when we judge ourselves, we find ourselves guilty and we need to be punished. Help us to love everything you create unconditionally, especially other human beings, especially those who live around us, all our relatives and people whom we try so hard to love. Because when we reject them, we reject ourselves. And when we reject ourselves, we reject you. Help us love others just the way they are with no conditions. Help us to accept we find them guilty, we blame them, and we have the need to punish them. Today, clean our hearts of any emotional poison that we have. Free our minds from any judgment so that we can live in complete peace and complete love. Today is a very special day. Today, we open our hearts to love again so that we can tell each other, I love you, without any fear and really mean it. Today, we offer ourselves to you. Come to us, use our voices, use our eyes, use our hands, and use our hearts to show ourselves in a communion of love with everyone. Today, Creator, help us to be just like you are. Thank you for everything that we receive this day, especially for the freedom to be who we really are. Amen.
Is this on? Is this on? Can you hear me? Oh, all right. Hi, good morning. So I recently came across a video on Facebook, and it was part of a series called The Daily Nas. And it's this Palestinian guy who goes around the world and he makes videos to open people's eyes up to different issues, great things that are happening around the globe, and various prejudices that people have. And at one point, he's making a video in a beautiful alleyway in Jerusalem. And it's in an Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. And he has grown up in the Palestinian part of Jerusalem and in an Arab culture. And he decides to set up his video station right there. And I don't know what he's making a video about, but he is sitting there and an Orthodox Jewish man walks by and they start exchanging pleasantries. And the Jewish guy's curious about what he's doing. And he says, tell me more about this. How many likes do you get? And it comes out that this guy is Arab. And the Jewish man is really taken aback, and he says, no, you can't be Palestinian, you're French, because you're too intelligent to be Palestinian. Palestinians are barbaric. And so they go back and forth, and this Palestinian guy is stunned. He's like, hey, wait, what? I know, I'm not French, I'm Palestinian, I'm Arab, I grew up right there. And the Jewish man's sister then walks by. She's 15 years old, and he says, this guy claims he's Palestinian. He thinks he's Arab. He's French. And she says, oh no, all Palestinians are terrorists. They're barbaric. They want to kill us. And then, so it unfolds, and this guy's still taken aback. And later on, there is a group of Orthodox Jewish people who walk by, and they give this Daily Nas guy a hug. They know he's Palestinian. They know he's Muslim, and they're fine with it. But the whole video is there to illustrate that a lot of people are harboring deep prejudices around the world. And not everybody is, but his point is not all Palestinians are terrorists. Most of them aren't. Most Arabs are not terrorists. And most Jews don't believe that, right? But he's just trying to dispel some of the prejudices. And I think that I was thinking about that video, and I had just been in India. And as someone with a tremendous language barrier in a place where there are about 1,000 languages and about 1,000 religions represented, I felt really insecure, and I felt fearful, and I felt some of my prejudices coming up. And I think that all of us, as we've grown up in our own stories, have these fears because we don't understand a culture. We don't understand the language. Emmett Fox, he's the author of the Sermon on the Mount. He wrote, "It is this basic feeling of being separate from God that fills man with fear. And under the dominion of fear, he does strange things. He believes he is on his own and must fight his own way in the jungle of human experience. This belief in the separation of God from God is the major tragedy of human existence, giving rise to many negative things that are faults of belief, not of fact." So when we're all first born, we're not filled with this fear. We don't have beliefs yet, right? We're held and we're nurtured. We trust, hopefully most of us, and we aren't filled with that. And then we begin the domestication process. We start being filled with beliefs by our surroundings. As Don Miguel Ruiz, in his book, The Four Agreements, he talks about the story that we all get brought up in. The adults around us hooked our attention and put information into our minds through repetition. We learned how to behave in society, what to believe and what not to believe, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, what is good and what is bad, what is beautiful and what is ugly, what is right and what is wrong. It was all there already, all that knowledge, all those rules and concepts about how to behave in the world. And then depending on the era or the region or the country or the climate, your race, political persuasion, religion, all this conditioning looked very different for every single person in this world. There were even differences in how we were shaped within our own families. Two siblings could grow up developing different attitudes and beliefs based on gender roles, based on birth order, brain chemistry plays a role, obviously, peer groups, teachers, and so on. So here we are. It's a whole planet full of people with opposing viewpoints and beliefs that get fueled, and then the conflicts, and they get fueled by all the sources and the media sources that perpetuate our fears. And unfortunately, there's something new in the news every day to get into conflict with and attack. In some cases, such as the ongoing struggle over the Gaza Strip, or the rivalry between India and Pakistan, or the effects of 68 million refugees around the world. These conflicts can threaten livelihood, or can even be life-threatening, which make these fears really real and very understandable. So I was in a counseling session recently, and our therapist showed us a Venn diagram. And if you're familiar with Venn diagrams, it's the two circles, and they overlap. And so if you're comparing like a dog and a cat, you show the differences in the outer circles, and then the part that they overlap, that's where you show the similar traits. And in a relationship, it starts in symbiosis. It's one circle. A couple operates as one when they fall in love, and they're inseparable at first, and they are intoxicated by learning about each other. And They reveal their best selves. Anytime we meet someone new, that person is mirroring our very best self, and so we feel like we're in symbiosis with ourselves as well. They can't stand to be apart because their best sides are activated when they're together. And then, of course, as we all know, the chemistry wears off, and the reality sets in, and we have to go on with our lives, and we get comfortable, and then the relationship and the excitement, of course, wears off, and they migrate back to the personas that they had before the relationship developed. And this persona was developed over time through schooling, through family, church, if you went to church, peer groups, neighborhoods, and all the conditioning that they were subjected to, which colored the lens through which they experienced the world. If the relationship is healthy, the circles overlap like a Venn diagram, and these two beings enjoy their independence, but they nurture the intersection of things they share in common. In an unhealthy relationship, these circles start to drift apart, and then you have two floating circles, and there's no longer any common ground. And then this results in criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, if you're familiar with the John Gottman work. And when it feels like that, you spend less time together, and so you're really not nurturing that common ground space. When couples exist in this separate state and these behaviors enter the scene, it becomes harder and harder to repair the relationship and find that compatibility again. What gets activated from these two circles is the guilt and the shame that they learned early in life when they didn't meet the expectations of those who were trying to condition them. They feel misunderstood and invisible, and the light that once shone when they were together in symbiosis gets dimmed and the eyes cast downward. This really got me thinking about the state of our world today and the chasm between nations, religions, races, political parties, cities, neighborhoods, friends, and family members. Sometimes it feels as if we're at war with anything who sees things differently than we do, which is evidenced on social media with impulsive and sometimes vicious comment threads. Recently, I was on the Roaring Fork Swap, and somebody mentioned there was a lion, like a mountain lion sighting in Glenwood Springs, and you wouldn't believe there were 50 comments, and people started attacking each other just because there was a mountain lion sighting. It's amazing. Opinions without accountability get blasted, and people make hostile character attacks on people they don't know beyond the screen. And then when topics such as gun rights and abortion, immigration, and climate change come up, that can activate a physical reaction within us. And it comes from a desire to protect a freedom or belief or livelihood that feels threatened. And this threat, it's like a fight or flight trigger, and it makes our frontal cortex flip, exposing our primal brain, the most primitive brain that's all based on survival. And it prevents us from really listening and understanding all sides of the issue or the person that we're in conflict with. This is the same physical and emotional feeling we get when we feel misunderstood, judged, attacked, dismissed in a relationship. Whether it's a political issue or an interpersonal drama, all of our responses are based in fear. The fear of change, the fear that something will be taken away from us, like a freedom, the fear of rejection, the fear of being wrong, and of being alone. This fear keeps us in our circles out here, and it clouds our vision because we're just filled in, we're activated, we're living from the primitive brain. I've witnessed my own extended family and my friends' extended families step into different circles that are drifting farther apart in today's climate. As these family members spend less and less time together, connecting in ways that generate laughter and good memories, the space between them is taken up by contempt, criticism, and assumptions. When there was a shared experience in the joy of weddings and births and holidays, and the bonding over loss and hardship has now been replaced by limited communication and blocked social media posts. At least that's what's happened in my family. Because the issues are so contentious, everyone is afraid to get together because so many topics are either taboo or maybe we're all afraid that our position is going to be challenged. Any disagreement with our position is taken as a personal attack because our identities are tied up in our beliefs, okay, which goes back to Emmett Fox. So we avoid family and community gatherings unless we know that we'll be surrounded by like-minded people, since our tendency is to identify with the mind over the heart. And as a result, we spend less time together. leading to less compassion and understanding because the overlap between the circles has diminished. This is the dynamic going on in today's political climate, obviously. The two parties have become so fundamentally different, each moving in opposite directions, that we can hardly engage in a friendly debate without being completely provoked. Perhaps because of the internet, we feel that there's more contempt and hatred than ever before. Or maybe these divisions have existed throughout time, leading to wars and ethnic cleansing. But whether this is a new and growing phenomenon or a condition that has persisted throughout time, there must be a better way to exist on this planet. There must be a way to nurture the overlapped area of human relationships and world religions, races, political parties, and socioeconomic groups to create mutual respect and coexistence among all people and species. But first, we must become aware of the conditioning from which we react to the people and situations we encounter. We must catch ourselves when we find ourselves judging and making assumptions and investigate why. And if we want to maintain civility without contempt, we must try to understand where people we disagree with are coming from. Who were they expected to be as they grew up? And what did their experiences teach them? Perfect opportunities for conflict are the blending of families through marriage and the blending of cultures through human migration. When families converge and young couples write their own stories, which reflect their own generation, everyone's stories get involved, and the stories are filled with pages of shoulds, right? We all come with our shoulds. And this is bound to create conflict, leading to hard feelings and separated circles within families. Or perhaps the cost of housing causes people to migrate into less expensive towns, and the values they bring with them don't align with the values with the older community members, and this can be really threatening. I saw this when I grew up in Boulder, and then everybody I knew couldn't afford Boulder, so they moved out to the outlying areas like Longmont, Superior, Lafayette, Louisville. Well, these were historically agricultural towns. They were small. People had agricultural values, small town values. And suddenly, people from New York and California are coming with their fancy coffee shops, and it starts to threaten your way of life, and you feel undermined. And it leads to conflict, naturally. Not only that, but population growth impacts everyone due to noise, congestion, and diminishing natural resources, and that's threatening. Everyone comes together in a traffic intersection, right? Everybody, anytime we migrate or blend, we're coming in as a traffic intersection, but each person has driven down a different road. And every different road has different rules and expectations. And then the starting locations that everyone came from had different values and norms. And so the roads offer different lessons, experiences, and perspectives. And so suddenly we're supposed to solve problems together. Don Miguel Ruiz refers to this early conditioning, like our road, in our lives as the book of law. He says, because everything in the book of law has to be true, anything that challenges what you believe is going to make you feel unsafe. Even if the book of law is wrong, it makes you feel safe. When we enter this intersection together, our safety does feel compromised unless we are willing to set our own book of law aside and work with everyone in the intersection with an open heart and mind, and to write a new one based on integrated beliefs, experiences, values, and expectations. Right now, it feels like we're all in the intersection honking and shaking our fist, and God knows what else behind those windows, right? In his book, Everything Belongs, Richard Rohr explores the idea of a beginner's mind. He says, the older we get, the more we've been betrayed and hurt and disappointed, the more barriers we put up to beginner's mind. We must never presume that we see. We must always be ready to see anew. But it's so hard to go back, to be vulnerable, to say to your soul, I don't know anything. If we could integrate this wisdom when we find ourselves among new people and situations that challenge our book of law, we might prevent suffering. Because if we see anew like a young child, then we're curious and open, and less likely to damage relationships with the noise in our heads caused by conditioning, old wounds, and fears. Richard Rohr also says, spirituality is about seeing. It's not about earning or achieving. It's about relationship, rather than results or requirements. Once you see, the rest follows. You don't need to push the river because you are in it. The life is lived within us, and we learn to say yes to that life. If we exist on a level where we can see that everything belongs, we can trust the flow and trust the life so large and deep and spacious that it even includes its opposite, death. I think this idea is beautiful and it's hard, because when you wake up and you hear on NPR about the serial killer from Ohio, or you hear about the atrocities around the globe, it is hard to really settle into everything belongs. But the idea that everything belongs can allow conflict and pain without the criticism and contempt that pushes us apart. Life is a river with rapids, rocks, and steep waterfalls. When fear dominates us, though, we react to the obstacles in the river with resistance, creating great conflict within our relationships and in the world, because whatever's going on internally is manifesting in the world. So we're all responsible. But when we let the oars down in surrender and trust, then we know everything and everyone belongs, even if we disagree. We are right now witnessing finger-pointing, condemning, accusing, and defending positions from circles that are miles apart. But what if both circles are right? How do we know what is true and what is right when we're holding on to our position so tightly that we can't hear anything else? How can we learn a different perspective when we're in our primal brain? I recently heard a recovering alcoholic say that her healing began only when her mother started listening to her with curiosity versus anger and reaction or fear. The healing began when her mother heard her with curiosity. If we are to use these vast differences of opinion to move towards solutions that honor everyone's human experiences, we must listen to each other with curiosity. Conflict happens when our books of law collide and when our positions are challenged. But the book of law is a costume. Underneath all that identity is the essence of who we really are. And that essence is the pure love that's expressed in symbiosis, like an infant and its mother, like a new relationship, or in experiencing the holy instant when we finally realized we are one with everything and everyone. A few years ago, I experienced the sense of symbiosis with every living thing. It came on suddenly in a traffic intersection in Longmont. I suddenly felt the deepest love and compassion for everyone around me, and even including those, actually especially those who had hurt me the most. For the first time in my life, the spiritual teachings became a physical and emotional experience, and I started sobbing in the middle of this intersection. I felt like I was choking on the feeling of knowing that everything was connected. It was fleeting, but it left a lasting impression and forever shifted my life. I felt true forgiveness and gratitude for absolutely everything, and I especially felt gratitude for the worst parts of my life. I haven't felt that acute sensation again, but my perspective on relationships and situations became spiritual lessons, helping me understand that everything did belong. But later that same year, I got involved with an activist group dealing with a contentious issue in Longmont. This group offered an opportunity to connect with others. It was really fun to go. They played music. But as I learned more about the issue, I became afraid. I would attend city council meetings, and when people on the other side of the issue walked in, I glared at them with criticism and contempt. I made assumptions about them and their lives. We were the good guys, of course, and they were the bad guys. And the more involved I became in the issue, the less I felt that oneness or symbiosis with life. I felt the separation many of us are experiencing now. What I failed to recognize was the essence of each of these individuals on the opposing side. All I could see was a suit that represented greed and exploitation. I couldn't see their children or their financial motivations to support their families. I didn't see their faces when their babies were born. Excuse me. I didn't see them hold their grandma's hand when she passed away or when they buried their pets. I didn't know what uphill battles they were facing with their children. I didn't see the guilt, shame, and loneliness they felt as they grew up in their book of law, different from mine, but created the same feelings of inadequacy. I didn't see them as infants with trusting eyes and pure love for all who cared for them. I never saw their look of delight when they took their first steps. Every time we get into conflict with an issue or a person, we must remember that underneath the facade is a human with a wide array of feelings, and they're also fumbling toward the light, making mistakes and learning hard lessons. If you ever take the time in any town or city, see, I've had the privilege of experiencing every town in the American West with the most depressing and rundown gas stations, and I've stayed in some of the worst hotels. My parents are here, and they've taken us to absolutely some of the worst places. And then when I had my own children, we always had to stop and change diapers and go to parks and stretch legs. And in that process, I've started to discover the natural beauty in places. So if you've had that chance to walk in a park or go to the open space near a depressing town even, without the storefronts and property taxes and school test scores and investments in the arts or lack thereof, if you look closely and recognize the natural beauty underneath all of that, you connect with it on a deeper level and you fall in love with it. Like I can love Gallup, New Mexico. And it's the same with people. When we take the time to really get to know someone underneath their skin color, underneath their title, their net worth, their zip code, their religion, their parenting style, their relationship to technology, or their behavior, we discover that we all weep and we all laugh at the same things. We all want connection, purpose, and love. And the more layers we get through, the more we realize there's one consciousness on this planet. Underneath the masks, costumes, and roles we're playing, there's a symbiotic relationship among all living things. But how do we get there? We can start by healing the relationships in our own lives by welcoming the silence necessary to become aware of how our own stories influence the internal and external conflicts in our lives. Inviting more silence and contemplation reconnects us to our divine essence, which doesn't tolerate mean-spirited retaliation or eye-for-an-eye responses to loved ones or politicians. We can be the first to apologize if there was a hurtful conflict, even if our contribution to the conflict was minimal. We can embrace and celebrate our imperfections to make it safe for others to do the same. We can resist polarity by reaching out to friends and family that we've distanced ourselves from due to our opposing beliefs. And when we do spend time together, we can try to enjoy each other without an agenda to control or influence them or defend our positions. We can visit places that challenge our book of law and relate to people with a beginner's mind. And if we want to witness the humanity or true essence in all people, we can watch families reunite at the airport or visit hospitals where families welcome new life and say goodbye to loved ones. As the historian Abirjani said, this world's anguish is no different from the love we insist on holding back. We must start with common ground and nurture the parts we share by offering the love we've been withholding. From there, we can stand by our opinions and we can stand up for ourselves, but in order to co-create a peaceful and prosperous world for all, we must first bring our circles back together and find that overlap and recognize the sameness among all of us, which is the essence of God and which is simply love. And then we have a video to share, which was my inspiration for this message this morning. And I think it kind of sums it up, but without words. It's beautiful, so. Okay. Sorry.
Nice mustache. One, two, three, four, five, six, five. Mit sechs, fünf.
Are you new in Berlin?
Yeah, 8 months.
And are you alone here or with your family?
No, I don't. This life, sometime nice, sometime not good.
Hi. Beatrice. Oh my god, I'm keeping my eyes on you. Oh. Hello. I expect you to ask my number. Be a strong man.
Thank you so much.
We will go to the zoo, maybe this few days.
Yes.
Text you if you would like to.
I
It's
would
good.
love it. Of course. You can do it.
When I was looking into her eyes, I was trying to see what I could tell from the life that she lived, and I think I could tell that there was a lot of experience lived there.
It doesn't matter, look at the eyes or something, just give yourself a chance to talk and to look at the other person.
Oh my. Thank you, Michelle, for such a powerful message. It's time to pray, and we want to remember members of our community who are struggling and hold them in our hearts for just a few minutes and lift them up. I have a list here, but I want to ask if anybody has anyone to add. We remember the Coffey family on the death of their son, Sam. The Ribbich family on the death of their son, Tyler. Mimi Schlumberger, who's struggling with cancer, and our beloved C.P. Knipe's brother, who is also struggling with cancer. And our much loved Michael Eisenart is struggling with Lyme disease. Does anyone else have anyone they'd like the community to remember today in prayer? Yes. Jerry Hayden, who passed away tragically last week. Yes. Sharon? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Jack struggling with bipolar disease. Yes. Others? Yes. Don, Sandy, and Benjamin. Okay, let us pray. God, remember all of these people and ask to touch them at their greatest point of need. We're grateful for this opportunity to come together as a community, to open our hearts, open our minds, and join together in the only known solution to conflict, and that is connection. We thank you for giving us this place and these people to walk this journey with together. Amen. It's time for our offertory, and we just thank all of you for your generosity to the chapel that allows this work to continue. Those of you that are streaming, you may contribute through the donate button online. And we ask that you give generously so that we can continue to be generous to others. We're so grateful today to have the music of Kathy Millis on violin and our own Susan Nicholson. Thank you so much for being with us. We invite everyone to join us for coffee downstairs. That was, if ever there was a message to produce 100% participation at coffee hour, I think that was it. There's an amazing exhibit of ceramic work downstairs called A Sense of Place. And we look forward to breaking bread with all of you there. There's a sign on the hike, the Albany-Kittle hike outside of Basalt, which is Basalt's equivalent of Smuggler Trail. It's the daily that you do when you don't have time to hike anywhere else. And somebody put a sign up there a few months ago, and it said, "It's easy to hate at a distance." move closer. And I'm so grateful for your message today, Michelle, and thank all of you all for being with you. One more week with Nicholas away, and then the A-team will return. But meanwhile, we bless you and send you out into the world this week with a message of love.